You know, it really feels like the whole global economic map is shifting under our feet right now. It's quite incredible.
It really is constant change.
And right in the middle of this massive realignment, Africa seems to be at such a pivotal moment, a real crossroads.
Absolutely. Strategic, you could say.
For so long, when we've talked about the continent's economic transformation, um, the focus tends to land on foreign capital, right? Or huge infrastructure projects.
Standard topics, yeah.
Yeah.
Roads, dams, investment figures.
But today, we want to dive deeper into something, well, maybe even more fundamental. It's about how Africa actually absorbs knowledge, how it adapts it, and how it puts that knowledge to work.
That's the key, isn't it? Not just receiving, but using.
Yeah, exactly. And we're grappling with a really critical question here, one that's right at the heart of the source material we've been looking at.
Which is,
Is the right kind of knowledge being transferred? And maybe even more crucial, are African actors, governments, firms, institutions truly owning this process? Are they in the driver's seat?
that's a huge question. And yeah, we've pulled together quite a stack of sources for this deep dive.
What have we got?
It's a fascinating mix, actually. Academic papers, some deep research excerpts, insightful analyses, all focused on knowledge transfer, development in Africa, and the role of different global partners.
Okay.
So our mission today, really, is to distill the most important insights from all this material. We want to help you, the listener, understand the core challenges, but also, crucially, the strategic opportunities for Africa to genuinely benefit from these global knowledge flows.
Right. Not just the problems, but the potential pathways forward.
Exactly.
Okay, let's start unpacking this then, because as I said, when we think about Africa's development, the narrative often highlights its incredible natural wealth, the resource.
That's the common story, for sure.
Yeah.
Minerals, oil, land.
But our sources seem to challenge that perspective quite strongly.
They really do. What's fascinating is how someone like Samuel Makinda, writing way back in 2007, saw this so clearly.
What did he say?
He basically argued that just having natural resources, well, it's simply not enough for sustainable growth. He posited that Africa's true deficit, its real gap, lies in its knowledge infrastructures.
Knowledge infrastructures. What does that entail exactly?
Things like strong scientific institutions, local technological capabilities, R&D ecosystems that are actually homegrown, endogenous.
I see. So it's about the capacity to create and use knowledge locally.
Precisely. In fact, Makinda puts it very directly. He states that Africa often remains a net consumer rather than a producer of usable knowledge.
A net consumer. That's a stark assessment.
It is. It highlights a fundamental imbalance.
So translating that, what does this mean for you, the listener, maybe someone looking at investment or development in Africa? What kind of environment does this create?
Well, it translates into a challenging environment, frankly. You see many African countries struggling with innovation systems that are, let's say, fragmented.
Okay.
There are often limited incentives for private companies to invest in their own research and development. And sometimes educational institutions aren't quite producing the skills needed for the immediate economic landscape.
Right, a mismatch.
Yeah. And the real danger here, as the sources point out, isn't just that foreign knowledge gets imported, it's that it can sometimes be imposed.
Imposed. How so?
In a way that reinforces dependency.
Yeah.
It might even crowd out local African-grown solutions that could actually be a better fit.
Okay, that makes sense. A potential downside to just bringing things in wholesale.
Definitely.
Now, speaking of foreign actors, one of the biggest shifts we've seen, especially since the early 2000s, is China's increasing presence across Africa.
Oh, absolutely. Massive infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, power plants, railways. It's transformed the landscape in many places.
And this China-Africa relationship is often presented as like a new model for development, isn't it? Something different from the traditional Western approach.
It is often framed that way. And there are some differences highlighted in the research. For instance, Osabuti and Jackson in 2019 noted that Chinese firms often transfer more applied, context-aware technologies.
Context-aware, meaning?
Methods and technologies that were refined during China's own, remarkable development journey. They tend to be more labor-intensive, perhaps more cost-effective, maybe more flexible than some Western alternatives.
Ah, okay. Technology is suited to a different stage of development, perhaps.
Potentially, yeah. And this has naturally sparked quite a bit of optimism around this idea of South-South knowledge flows.
South-South, meaning knowledge shared between developing nations themselves.
Exactly. The thinking is that this knowledge might be better matched to African development needs because of, shared economic structures or similar historical paths.
It seems logical, doesn't it? Learning from someone who's faced similar challenges.
It does seem logical, but here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a bit disappointing according to the sources.
Okay.
Despite this potential, the actual knowledge transfer often remains surprisingly low. Osabuti and Jackson, for example, they highlight that Chinese firms frequently bring in their own people for the high-skilled roles.
Limiting local involvement at the top.
Right. And they tend to resist genuine joint ventures sometimes. And crucially, they don't always embed local capacity building deeply into their project plans.
So the skills don't always stick around after the project is done.
That's the concern. And this problem is often made worse by things like language barriers, maybe limited incentives for the firms to really invest in training, and sometimes, frankly, weak policy frameworks in the host countries themselves to demand it.
Right, so it's a two-way street issue.
Very much so.
Okay, so if the traditional models, and even this newer China model, aren't quite hitting the mark on deep knowledge transfer, what does effective transfer look like? Do the sources offer a better way?
They do. There's a really game-changing framework, I think, introduced by Rui, Zhang, and Shipman back in 2016. It brings in two absolutely essential concepts.
Okay, let's hear them.
The first one is relevant knowledge. Relevant knowledge.
Relevant, okay.
This isn't about transferring the most advanced bleeding-edge technology you can find. It's about knowledge that is actually applicable, that can be assimilated or absorbed locally, and that's affordable within the recipient's specific context.
So practicality over prestige.
Exactly. As one source powerfully puts it, the best knowledge is not the most advanced. It is the most relevant to solving real problems. It's about the right tool for the job, not necessarily the shiniest one.
I like that. Relevant knowledge. What's the second concept?
The second one is recipient ownership.
Recipient ownership. Makes sense.
Yeah, this is where the local actors, governments, firms, communities aren't just passive receivers. They actively shape what knowledge gets transferred and how it gets transferred.
So they're co-designing the process.
Precisely. It's transformative because it shifts knowledge transfer from being this sort of one-way handout into a dynamic process of co-creation. It's about having agency.
Having a real say in what happens.
Exactly. And we actually see a really compelling example of this in practice, described in the sources from Ethiopia.
Oh, tell me about that.
Well, Rui and their colleagues describe how the Ethiopian government, when dealing with Chinese firms on infrastructure projects, didn't just sign the contracts. They specifically mandated that these projects had to include local training components and institutional capacity building.
They built it into the deal.
They built it in, and the results, which are detailed quite clearly in the source material, were apparently transformative. It really showed the power of that recipient ownership in action, making demands, shaping the outcome.
Wow. Okay, so relevant knowledge and recipient ownership are key. But it feels like there's maybe another layer. It can't just be about the what and the who, right? Yeah. The surrounding environment must matter.
Absolutely. You're spot on. It's not just the knowledge type or the ownership model, but also the underlying systems that enable or block effective transfer. There's no single silver bullet here.
Right. It's never that simple.
No. And Ospiti and Jin, using this quite sophisticated analytical method, fuzzy set qualitative comparative analysis, if you want the technical term.
Okay, sounds complex.
It is, but the takeaway is important. They found that effective, high-quality knowledge transfer isn't usually down to just one single factor. It's about the synergy, the combination of multiple elements working together.
Ah, the right mix.
Exactly. They actually identified two distinct recipes, as they call them, two combinations of factors that consistently seem to enable high-quality knowledge transfer.
Interesting. What are these recipes?
Well, the first recipe combines strong institutions, think rule of law, stable governance, effective education systems, and what they term low firm congestion.
Low firm congestion, meaning not too much competition or...
Sort of. Maybe an environment where new collaborations or firms are immediately stifled by an overcrowded or overly aggressive market. Room to breathe and partner.
Okay. And the second recipe?
The second one involves strong government incentives policies that actively encourage transfer, combined again with strong institutions and effective education.
So strong institutions and education seem to be common threads in both successful recipes.
Very much so. They appear foundational.
This really points towards a systems approach, doesn't it? It's about how all the pieces fit together.
Exactly. When education policy institutions, when they all align and reinforce each other, that's the sweet spot. That's when knowledge transfer can truly stick, scale up, and make a lasting difference. It's like getting all the gears to mesh properly.
Right. The whole ecosystem needs to be supportive.
Precisely.
Okay, so putting all this together, what does this actually mean for Africa's path forward? How does the continent move from perhaps being a net consumer or passive receiver of knowledge to truly owning it and leveraging it for its own distinct development goals?
Well, McKinda, going back to his work, is very clear on this.
Yeah.
He argues that for Africa to genuinely benefit, to really harness these global knowledge flows, it has to take proactive, strategic steps. It needs to define its own knowledge priorities first. What does it actually need? Then revamp its intellectual institutions, universities, research centers, and critically, invest in strategic leadership capable of navigating this complex space.
So taking control of the agenda.
Yes. And it's crucial, I think, to internalize the idea that knowledge is not neutral. This is a quote that resonates from the sources. It is socially constructed and politically shaped.
Meaning it comes with context, maybe biases.
Exactly. So African countries need to move beyond just passively accepting whatever knowledge is offered. They need to get into active negotiation, demand co-ownership of the whole process. The presence of foreign companies or partners, wherever they're from, needs to be leveraged strategically to build internal capabilities, not just substitute for them.
Build, not replace. Yep.
That's the core idea, strategic leveraging.
This feels much more concrete now. It's not just theory, is it? The sources seem to outline some very specific policy implications, actual steps that can be taken.
Oh, definitely. It's not just high-level critique.
Moving from being a simple gatekeeper, just letting investment in, to strategically empowering the nation. What are some of those levers?
Right. The sources lay out about 5 critical areas for policy intervention. First, governments really need to develop and enforce binding local content and knowledge clauses.
Binding clauses, meaning
Embedding explicit, non-negotiable knowledge transfer requirements into all foreign investment contracts. Things like mandatory, high-quality training programs for locals, requirements for genuine joint ventures with local firms, and clear benchmarks for technology sharing. Make it part of the deal up front.
Got it. Non-negotiable. What's next?
Second is building absorptive capacity. This is fundamental.
Absorptive capacity, the ability to actually take in and use the knowledge.
Exactly. It means significantly expanding investments in relevant education and vocational training, STEM fields. Establishing research institutions that are genuinely aligned with national priorities, not just chasing global trends. And building the infrastructure needed for technical learning labs, workshops, connectivity. You need to be ready to catch the knowledge.
Okay, build the capacity to absorb.
Third, they must institutionalize recipient ownership, really bake it into the system.
How do you institutionalize ownership?
By empowering African negotiators, giving them the skills they need, sophisticated skills in cross-cultural project management, technology law, intellectual property negotiation, complex investment policy analysis and evaluation. Equip the local teams to lead and shape the deals effectively.
So, skilling up the people at the table.
Absolutely. Fourth area is creating effective innovation incentives.
Incentives for what exactly?
For actively rewarding collaboration between foreign investors and local firms or institutions.
Yes.
You could use mechanisms like targeted tax breaks for joint R&D, schemes that encourage joint patenting of new innovations, providing shared research funding, make it attractive for them to work together and innovate locally.
Sparking that synergy.
Yes. And finally, the fifth point is about scaling regional knowledge ecosystems.
Thinking beyond national borders.
Exactly. Developing regional hubs, joint research centers, platforms where countries can share best practices, facilitate cross-border knowledge transfer between African nations themselves, and build economies of scale in learning across the continent. Learn from each other.
Connect the dots regionally.
Yeah.
Okay, those are 5 very concrete areas.
They provide a clear roadmap, I think.
This whole deep dive, it really underscores something powerful, doesn't it? That Africa's future isn't just going to be defined by how much investment it attracts.
No, not so.
It's about how strategically it converts that investment, those partnerships, into tangible learning, into real innovation, and ultimately into lasting self-directed transformation.
Well said. It's about moving from what one source strikingly calls perpetual dependency to empowered design.
Empowered design. I like that.
To get there, Africa really needs to embrace knowledge transfer not as some kind of one-way transaction or aid, but as a context-driven, genuinely mutually beneficial partnership.
A real partnership.
Yeah, the opportunity is immense. It truly is. But it's only going to materialize through deliberate, intentional leadership, through getting those systems aligned like we discussed, and maintaining an absolutely unwavering commitment to strategic learning.
Learning as strategy.
That's it.
So, as you, our listener, reflect on this deep dive, maybe take a moment to consider how these core principles, this idea of relevant knowledge and recipient ownership, might apply beyond just national development. Think about your own learning journey.
Interesting parallel.
How can you ensure that the knowledge you seek out and acquire isn't just, the most advanced or the most talked about, but is truly relevant to solving your unique problems, your specific challenges?
And perhaps even more importantly,
And how can you actively own that learning process yourself? How can you shape it, direct it, rather than just passively receiving information fed to you? Something to think about.